G'day and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I want to talk you through 3 really good exercises to help treat knee pain from running. And then also on top of that, I want to make sure that by the end of this video, you have a really strong perspective as to why running is most likely not the cause of your knee pain. Even though you might find that it does occur when you're running or it might happen after running, I want to make sure that we can give you a really interesting perspective to help you sort of better understand why that knee's become sore in the first place and why running's probably not the area of your life that we need to blame. So before we get to that, obviously, please let me know in the comments down below what knee pain are you dealing with at the moment. Because the interesting thing about these exercises that we're going to get to is that it basically applies to any and all knee pain. And the reason for that is that whether you've got an ITB issue or a patellofemoral joint issue with your kneecap, whether you've got some patellar tendonitis at the tendon at the front, whether you've got some meniscal issues deep in the knee, or whether you've done your ACL potentially, or you're having like a Baker's cyst or some pain at the back of the knee, the root cause of most knee pain is very similar. It just expresses itself differently depending on the person and what you might be doing. So as you'll see with these 3 exercises, we're going to go through an ankle exercise and 2 hip exercises, because the way that I want you to think about this, irrespective of what type of knee pain that you have, is we need to think of your knee as a joint of consequence. Because anatomically, it's literally physically stuck in between your ankle and your hip. So if you have some subtle, hidden, covert ankle or hip restrictions, your knee is always trying to compensate around that. It's trying to find a way around that to solve a set of problems on your behalf. And then when you expose that to something repetitious like running, then it can set it up for failure over time. But if it's not running, it might be walking for some people. If you have to walk up and down a lot of stairs, there can be a number of repetitious things that expose that underlying dysfunction. But as I said before, we don't want you to think of running as the cause of that. We want to think of it more as the thing that you were doing that finally exposed that underlying dysfunction. So a really good way to understand this is when we look at your squatting. In a perfect world, when somebody squats with your feet straight, we want to rotate those knees out to put your arches in a good position. When we're holding that shape, essentially, when you squat down, those knees should essentially end up out and your feet should remain straight. But what you'll find is if you have an ankle or a hip restriction, as you come down and run into that end of range and you can't go any deeper, your body will start to compensate in some way. You'll have to force the foot to turn out to get down, or you might find that as you come down, your knee will cave in a little bit. You might find that you'll have to round your back a little bit more, or you might find that you'll end up lifting your heels up off the ground. And what this is basically, this is a sign that your body is compensating for something. So instead of being able to complete the task in a perfect way, your body's having to find a way around that to help you do that. And the reason why running is such a fantastic exercise and why squatting relates so heavily to running is because we can see your mechanics in real time. So if you find that you squat and you can only get down a certain point before you have to cheat and go further, it's very likely that when you're running, which is essentially some mini squat after mini squat, you might find your body will be doing the same motion, but in a harder to see way through that repetition and speed from running. So what I want to really get across in this video is that these exercises are going to try and address some of the distals to the lower dysfunction and some of the proximal dysfunction above and below that knee, so that we can reorientate the way that your knee is moving and the way that knee is being loaded, so that that knee pain goes away. And obviously there's a lot of local issues that we can do, and obviously if you come in to see us, we can treat those local issues and those specific issues to you, but often those broader mechanical issues are the things that go missing. And when we're trying to treat and fix knee pain from running, we tend to be looking in some of the, not the wrong areas, but we tend to miss some of the other stuff that's going on because it doesn't necessarily hurt, for example. So we can obviously get to some strength exercises in another video, but this video is going to be tailored towards the mobility stuff to try and take away those hidden handbrakes and allow your knee to reorientate itself a lot better and hopefully get to the source of that pain that you take into running. So you take those symptoms into running, and running exposes that. So that's the concept that I want to make sure that you sort of keep in the back of your mind while we're doing this, because it's a really great way to frame knee pain, which is more than just a knee issue, it's a leg issue. So let me know in the comments how your knee's going. If you're going to enjoy this video, obviously please leave a like rating on the video and consider subscribing to the channel if you're new or if you like this type of content. It just helps the channel grow. It helps more people see these videos as well, so we'd appreciate that. But getting into it, obviously, the first exercise that we want to get to is a banded ankle stretch. So essentially, you want to get yourself a band of some sort. So a TheraBand that you tie to something does work, but you need a lot of resistance to make this exercise work really well. I'll leave a link in the description for the bands themselves, just so you can check them out, you see what they're all about. But we want to tie it to something that's not going to follow you. And essentially what we want to get you to do is we want to put this above your ankle bone, and we want to stretch that foot out as far as you feel comfortable, and then bring your other foot past that as well. So I don't know if you can see this very well in the video. I'll go this direction. So essentially we want to have the ankle behind you that you're trying to stretch. And what a lot of people do with this is they tend to take a step and then squat down on the exercise. And that can really make the knee work a lot harder than it should. It can be hard to sustain this position. What I like to do basically is I like to have your hips go past your foot and then try and bend your ankle a little bit. And you should find it's a lot easier to hang off that ankle and find the position that you need to be in. So in terms of the position itself, you want the band trailing behind you. You want to stretch the band out as far as you feel comfortable. But what we want to make sure that you do with this is we want to respect the basic mechanics of how your leg's working, or how it should be working in the first place. So much like what we said before about squatting, that the feet may turn out and your knee may cave in, we want to make sure that we don't fall into that trap with this exercise. So we want to have your foot straight as you step past it, and we want to make sure that that knee doesn't want to cave inwards. We want to keep that knee out as far as you feel comfortable without your big toe lifting up off the ground. And then we essentially just want to stay here for as long as you feel comfortable. So we can stay here for 30 seconds, stay here for a minute, 2 minutes, whatever you feel worthwhile. But the interesting thing about this exercise is in a lot of videos that you'll see on YouTube, they'll have the band below the ankle bone, because that respects the joint motion or the joint mechanics really, really well. But for me, I actually like to have the band above the ankle, because what I find is when you put it into a joint, when you put the joint into a position that it's restricted in, so when I'm in this position, I can feel some stiffness, I actually find it's a great way to then add that resistance and add that tension to really bias the back of the joint. And the reason why this exercise is so good is it addresses some of the deep underlying joint capsular stiffness. So it's not necessarily a muscular stretch. It is going to sort of help free up some of the muscular stuff, but it's going to get underneath to the joint itself. And that joint capsule is often highly misunderstood or overlooked a lot when we're trying to solve knee pain, because it doesn't hurt. It's just going to be a pressure. It can be a lot of pressure if it's quite stiff, but adding a band to that is a really good way to bias that capsule and automatically and immediately restore some normal motion to that tissue. So what I always recommend with this exercise is do a couple of deep squats with your feet straight and your knee out as deep as you feel comfortable before the exercise, then recheck with your squats again afterwards, and you should feel like it's immediately easier to squat. And then we know that then you're going to be loading up your knee a little bit better because of that. So the banded ankle stretch is the first exercise, taking away some of that hidden restriction below the knee. It's hugely common for most knee issues, so it's a really important one to try and figure out and solve for yourself. The second exercise is potentially one of, if not the best exercises that I've seen as a physical therapist, especially for knees, but it's a great exercise for back pain, hip pain, and a lot of other things as well. And it's the couch stretch. And if you've been a viewer of the channel before, you'll know that we love this. We do this a lot. It can be a brutal stretch, but basically what the couch stretch is, just to show you the position to begin with, is we're going to get you with your knee into the back corner of a chair. So obviously with me being on the ground here, you can do it up on a chair, any chair. A couch is obviously a great place to do it, hence the name. But what the way that we want to get you to do this basically is we want to get your knee right into the back corner, so as far back as you can. So you'll need to lean forward first. We then want to get your other leg up, and then the basis of the exercise is eventually we want to get you to the point where you feel you can come up vertically and really open up the front of that hip. Now, if you haven't done this before, or if you're really tight there, you might find that this is quite a brutal position to get into. So feel free not to just go straight up into this position. We want to get you to a point where you feel comfortable sustaining the shape and being able to breathe and have a laugh and feel comfortable without wanting to vomit and pass out. So if you feel like you're really struggling to maintain this position, feel free to come down a little bit more horizontally. Again, it's best to start doing this in the back of the chair. I would do it, but you obviously wouldn't see me, but essentially how it looks is getting you into this position here and then coming up as tall as you feel comfortable. If you have the arm of the chair, you can definitely hold on to find that better position for you. But what we want to get you to do with this basically is when you're in this position, We want to make sure that you find the position that feels the most comfortable for you. Squeeze that butt cheek, and what I want you to do here is, instead of just holding this for a period of time and hoping that these hip flexors release, I want you to get active. So I want you to squeeze your butt cheek. I want you to push your foot gently back into the back of the chair or wherever you are. Hold that for a couple of seconds to activate that muscle, make it work. And then after 5 to 10 seconds, relax, and you should actually find that that muscle is released a little bit. It'll be a little bit less sensitive, a little bit less tender, a little bit less uncomfortable to do. And then just keep going back into that slack that you've created for yourself until you feel like you've had enough. And this is easily one of the best exercises for knee pain, because what it does is two things. Is if you are tight at the front of the hip, it tends to pull a bunch of slack out of the knee. So it's a really common thing for patellar tendon issues and a lot of kneecap issues, ITB issues. The front of that hip tends to be tighter than it should be, and it pulls a bit of slack out of there, sets that tissue up for pain and dysfunction from the repetition of running. So that's really, really important. But the other interesting thing that a lot of people don't realize is if your hip flexors are tight, it makes it a lot harder for you to extend your hip when you're running. And what basically happens is, in a similar way to your body working around an ankle restriction, if you can't extend your hip far enough because of some tightness at the front, your body will then have to try and compensate to complete the movement. So we often see a lot more people either swinging around, but also turning their foot out, which can then lead to more dysfunction when your foot hits the ground again. So with some ankle restriction and some restriction at the front of the hip, we tend to see those as two of some of the main predisposing factors to a lot of that rotational knee pain. So highly recommend doing those two, because they're such an important mechanical, they're so good at improving the mechanics of your running that it's really doing yourself a disservice if you're not giving those a go. So banded ankle stretch, couch stretch, two highly recommended exercises. The third exercise plays into the rotational issues that tend to happen a lot with running, and we're going to go through the pigeon stretch or the pigeon pose. Essentially, the stretch itself is just you getting into a position where you rotate that leg underneath and drop that down. Now, obviously, doing it on the ground is a lot harder, so you can definitely do it up on a chair or a bench or a table. And how that looks basically is we get you up into this position, throw your leg back before you drop your knee down. You want to be up nice and tall from your back, and then just lower that knee down as far as you feel comfortable. So essentially how that would be is that you're up nice and tall here, and then you let the knee drop down as far as you feel comfortable. And the important thing with this is that we're looking for some tightness through the butt cheek of this side. So and the reason why this is really important is that with that rotational restriction, it can really it can encourage the knee and force that leg to rotate inwards and dump inwards, which can be, as I said, a really terrible thing for a lot of knee pain. So essentially the same thing as the couch stretch. You want to find a version of this stretch that feels comfortable for you, so only go as far as you feel comfortable. And what we want to do again is we want to get active. So we want to get you to tense up those glute muscles, push your foot back into the ground, hold it for a couple of seconds, and then as soon as you relax, you should find that you can drop down a little bit deeper and feel more comfortable in this position. Now, the other thing that I like to do with this is I like to rotate towards the knee that I'm stretching and rotate away from the knee that I'm stretching, just to figure out which specific area feels the best for me. And by best, I mean the most tight. And for me, if I rotate around towards the camera a little bit more, it feels like it's a better stretch for me. So I want to be in this position while I'm tensing those muscles and releasing those muscles to really allow that tissue to give and to feel better. And again, the same thing as before. It's really fantastic to do some deep squats before and afterwards, just to see how much more comfortable it feels for you. And that rotation that we just did with the pigeon stretch is the same movement that we're trying to create and try and reclaim in that knee to create a stable position for that knee to hinge back and forwards through while we're running. So it's really important that when you're trying to solve your running related knee pain, that we think of it as more than just a knee issue and more than just a running related issue. So if you're not taking a look at your footwear, heeled shoes, and your sitting habits, then it's very easy to miss ankle stiffness and hip restriction that we then take into running. So with that being said, hope that was helpful. Let me know in the comments down below how you're going with it all, and then we'll see you in the next one. Bye.